Zoos are meant to be fun, family-friendly spots full of wonder, not places where things go horribly wrong. But every now and then, something so strange and unexpected happens, it sounds more like a twisted movie plot than real life. From freak accidents to jaw-dropping mistakes, here are 5 bizarre zoo deaths that will leave you stunned.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It was July 29, 1994 at the Alaska Zoo in Anchorage. For 29-year-old Catherine Warren, a tourist from Sydney, Australia, it was supposed to be the highlight of her vacation. She loved wildlife photography, and the Alaska Zoo promised just that. But what began as a day of adventure would soon turn into a nightmare that would make headlines across the world. Catherine had heard about him, Binky, the 200-pound polar bear who had become a local legend. He'd been at the zoo since 1970, rescued as an orphaned cub near Cape Beaufort. To the people of Anchorage, Binky was both beloved and feared. As a cub, he'd been flown to meet children in remote villages. As an adult, he'd become infamous for his unpredictable temper. He had once bitten off a zoo worker's finger. That morning, as Catherine stood in front of Binky's enclosure, camera in hand, she wanted a shot no one else had. What happened next was over in seconds. Binky noticed her, this strange figure suddenly standing too close to his cage. His instincts ignited. With a sudden, powerful movement, he lunged forward, his massive paw shooting through the bars. Before Catherine could react, his jaws clamped down on her thigh. The sound of her scream cut through the air, silencing the crowd. People froze, then panic erupted. Visitors rushed toward the enclosure, grabbing sticks, rocks, and beating against the bars. They shouted, trying to scare him off, but Binky only tightened his grip. The 200-pound bear was in complete control. For several agonizing minutes, he dragged her closer, refusing to let go. Catherine's leg twisted, bones snapping under the pressure. Her camera clattered to the ground. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Binky released her. Blood soaked her clothes as bystanders pulled her to safety. She was rushed to the hospital, her leg shattered, her thigh shredded with deep bite marks. She survived, but she would never forget the feeling of being at the mercy of a predator. Later, when asked about it, she admitted quietly, "It was the dumbest thing I've ever done." But while Catherine recovered, Binky's legend only grew. The very next day, a photographer snapped an eerie image. The massive polar bear standing proudly in his enclosure, Catherine's torn shoe dangling from his mouth like a trophy. The photo went viral, splashed across newspapers, television screens, and souvenir stands. Suddenly, Binky wasn't just a zoo animal, he was an icon. People began buying t-shirts and mugs featuring the photo, printed with the slogan, "Send another tourist." Now, this one got away. Some found it darkly humorous. Others saw it as a grim warning, a reminder that humans, not animals, are usually the ones who cross the line. But the story didn't end there. Just 6 weeks later, on the night of September 11th, another incident sent shockwaves through Anchorage. A group of intoxicated teenagers broke into the zoo after hours. They wanted to swim in Binky's pool. One of them, a 19-year-old, got too close. Moments later, screams echoed through the darkness. When authorities arrived, the teen's leg was torn open, and Binky was found nearby, with blood on his face. 2 attacks in less than 2 months. Binky became both feared and admired, the bear who reminded everyone what wild really meant. International media swarmed the zoo. Some called for him to be euthanized. Others defended him fiercely, saying he was only doing what nature had designed him to do. But behind all the headlines, Binky's life took a tragic turn. In 1995, his companion, a female polar bear named Nuka, fell gravely ill from a parasitic disease. She died that summer. A week later, Binky began showing the same symptoms: seizures, convulsions. On July 20th, 1995, he collapsed and never woke up.
A 52-year-old zookeeper lost his life after a tragic encounter with a tiger. The zookeeper, tending to the tiger's feeding routine, reportedly neglected to secure the safety door separating him from the animal's enclosure.
It was a cold, quiet December morning at Pittsburgh Zoo in Romania, the kind of day that blends into routine. The animals were waking, the paths still empty of visitors, and behind the scenes the staff began their usual rounds. Among them was a 52-year-old zookeeper, a man with years of experience under his belt, someone who had spent much of his life caring for the animals behind the cages. He wasn't new to danger. He knew the risks, but even the most seasoned professionals can be undone by one moment of forgetfulness. That morning, he entered the tiger's enclosure to clean, a task he had likely done hundreds of times before. According to protocol, the tiger should have been secured behind a high-fenced safety area, locked away by a steel door before any human stepped foot inside the pen. It was a simple, essential rule, one designed to keep the humans safe and the animals calm. But something went wrong. That door, the last barrier between predator and keeper, was never closed. Romanian media reported that the man ignored a basic but crucial procedure, ensuring the tiger was fully separated before entering the space. It's unclear whether it was a slip in judgment or just a tragic oversight, but what is certain is that the moment he stepped inside, he was not alone. Without warning, the tiger re-entered the enclosure. There was no time to react. The massive cat lunged forward and bit him directly on the head. The attack was instantaneous and ferocious. Emergency services were called immediately, but when they arrived, there was nothing more they could do. The man was pronounced dead at the scene. The bite had been fatal. As word of the incident spread, shock and grief gripped the zoo staff and the wider community. The mayor of Pittsburgh confirmed it was the first such fatal incident in over 50 years, a chilling first in a place meant to showcase the beauty of wildlife, not its deadly side. "It is a huge loss," he said. "Our thoughts go out to the victim's family and loved ones in these moments of pain." The zoo immediately launched an internal investigation, and prosecutors opened a criminal case for manslaughter. Witnesses described the scene as extremely violent. One city representative told reporters bluntly, "The man forgot to close the safety door. The tiger entered back in his cage and bit him from the head." This wasn't the first time Pittsburgh Zoo had faced issues with tiger enclosures. Back in 2000, another incident nearly turned tragic when a tiger escaped after a worker forgot to lock several doors. That animal was recovered in a nearby forest and brought back without harm, but it raised concerns about procedural lapses, concerns that it seems were never fully addressed. This time, though, there was no lucky ending, no safe return, just a brutal reminder of the dangers that come with working so closely with wild animals. In the days that followed, the zoo suspended all operations as officials began reviewing and rewriting safety procedures. But no set of rules can erase what happened. No revision can fill the silence left by a colleague who didn't make it home. He was more than a worker. He was a caretaker, someone who had built trust with creatures most of us only see from behind glass. And in a tragic twist, that trust, or perhaps the familiarity that comes with years of routine, proved to be his downfall. Sometimes it takes only one forgotten step, one unlocked gate, one unclosed door. And in the world of wild animals, that's all it takes for everything to go fatally wrong.
Some unbelievable video this noon from Beijing, China. You can see a tiger snatching a woman who got out of her car in a wildlife park.
It was July 23, 2016, a warm summer afternoon in Beijing, China. Miss Zhao, a woman in her 30s, decided to spend the day with her family at the Beijing Bottling Wildlife Park. The plan was simple, a relaxing drive through the park's famous safari section, where visitors could see tigers, lions, and bears just a few feet away from the safety of their car. Along for the ride were her mother, Mrs. Zhou, her husband, and their young child, all eager for a family day surrounded by nature. As the sun beat down and the car crept along, Miss Zhao started to feel uneasy. A wave of dizziness hit her, car sickness. In that brief, impulsive moment, despite the countless warning signs and loudspeakers repeating, "Do not exit your vehicle under any circumstances," she opened the door. She stepped out, just for some fresh air. She walked around to the driver's side to speak to her husband, a simple action that would change everything. It happened in an instant. From behind her, a massive Siberian tiger appeared like a flash of orange and black. With terrifying speed, it lunged, clamped its jaws around her, and dragged her off the road into the tall grass. Her husband screamed. Her mother's instincts kicked in. Mrs. Zhou didn't hesitate. She threw open her door and ran after the tiger, unarmed, terrified, but desperate to save her daughter. Rangers shouted for her to stop. It was too late. Another tiger emerged from the trees, and within seconds, the scene turned into a nightmare no family could ever forget. By the time park rangers arrived, the attack was over. Miss Jiao had survived, barely bleeding, unconscious, and mauled beyond recognition. But her mother, the woman who ran into the jaws of death to save her, was gone. The entire event, partially caught on the park security cameras, spread across social media within hours. Shock turned to outrage. Who was to blame? The family who broke the rules, or the park that allowed this to happen in the first place? The park was quickly shut down for investigation. Officials claimed their safety measures were more than adequate. Multiple warning signs, speaker announcements, and a signed safety agreement at the gate. They said the tragedy was caused by one fatal choice: stepping out of the car. The park later banned self-driving tours through the tiger enclosure and added more visible signs. From her hospital bed, she insisted the park hadn't done enough to make visitors understand just how dangerous the situation truly was. Her family filed a lawsuit demanding 1.55 million yuan to cover funeral costs, medical bills, and emotional damages. Her father testified that they were pressured to sign the entry agreement without proper explanation. He argued that the park's responsibility didn't end at the warning signs, that it had a duty to protect its guests, especially in areas with unpredictable wild animals. For months, the story haunted social media in China. The footage was replayed again and again, that single moment where a woman opened her car door, unaware that death was just a few steps away. The incident forced every zoo and safari park in the country to rethink safety, communication, and the true nature of wild.
Tragedy at the Pittsburgh Zoo on Sunday. A 2-year-old boy was killed when he fell into an exhibit of endangered African dogs. His mother had put him up on a railing for a better look, and then the boy lost his balance.
It was a Sunday afternoon in early November 2012, the kind of cool fall day when families venture out for small adventures, to laugh, to learn, to share simple moments. The Pittsburgh Zoo and Beijing Aquarium bustled with life, the sounds of chattering children and excited parents echoing between exhibits. Among the visitors that day were Jason and Elizabeth Durkosh, accompanied by their bright-eyed, curious little boy, 2-year-old Maddox. Maddox was full of energy and wonder, the kind of child who loved to see animals up close. As the family reached the African painted dog exhibit, the scene looked deceptively peaceful. A high observation deck overlooking an open enclosure with 11 wild dogs pacing below. Their enclosure was surrounded by clear warnings and sturdy barriers, reminders that the animals within, though beautiful, were not to be underestimated. Elizabeth, wanting to give her son a better view, did something that many other parents had been seen doing before. She lifted Maddox onto the railing of the observation deck, just for a moment, just to let him see. But in that fleeting instant, everything changed. Maddox slipped. He tumbled from his mother's arms, falling 14 feet. He didn't fall gently. He bounced off a safety net that had never been meant to catch a child, only lost hats or sunglasses, and then landed hard inside the enclosure. What happened next was horror in its rawest form. Before anyone could scream, before the staff could react, the wild dogs descended. 11 predators, quick, coordinated, unrelenting. Maddox was alive when he hit the ground, fully conscious. He screamed, and then the screaming stopped. Elizabeth tried to climb into the enclosure, desperate to reach her baby, but another guest held her back. The crowd watched, helpless, as the pack did what wild animals are hardwired to do. One officer on the scene, in a moment of sheer desperation, fired his weapon and killed one of the dogs. But it was already too late. When zoo staff arrived, including veterinarian Barbara Baker, they found a scene no one should ever have to witness. Maddox was beyond saving. He had been torn apart, his small body ravaged by more than 46 bites, his organs destroyed, his blood soaking the earth of the exhibit floor. There was no rescue to be made. The incident shocked the nation. Initial reports speculated whether it was the fall that killed him or the attack, but it was confirmed. Maddox had survived the fall. It was the wild dogs that killed him. The public wanted answers. How could this happen? Why wasn't the safety net strong enough? Why didn't the zoo prevent this? Why did a mother lift her child onto a railing despite the warnings? Grief turned to anger. Confusion turned to lawsuits. Elizabeth Durkosh, though never criminally charged, filed her own lawsuit against the zoo, eventually settling out of court. The debate raged on in public forums, but none of it brought Maddox back. What remains is the memory, the unbearable memory, of a child whose life ended in the most violent, unimaginable way, in a place where families go to feel wonder, not fear. And for those who were there that day, for the zoo staff, the first responders, the other visitors, and most of all, for his parents, the sound of that fall, the chaos of those seconds, the silence that followed, it never really leaves.
A zoo under fire for shooting and killing an endangered gorilla instead of tranquilizing him. After the animal dragged a child around its enclosure, the child had fallen into that enclosure.
It was May 28, 2016, at the Cincinnati Zoo. By afternoon, the gorilla enclosure home to a 17-year-old western lowland silverback named Harambe would become the center of a global tragedy. 4-year-old Isaiah Dickerson came to the zoo with his mother, Michelle Gregg, and father, Dayon Dickerson. It was meant to be a fun family outing until Isaiah whispered something that would soon haunt the world. "I want to swim with the gorilla." Moments later, he was gone. Witnesses heard a splash and then screams. "Oh my God, there's a kid in there," someone shouted. Isaiah had slipped past the railing, crawled through the bushes, and fallen nearly 10 feet into the moat, right in front of Harambe. The 400-pound silverback turned toward the small boy. At first, it didn't look violent. Some even said Harambe seemed protective, standing over Isaiah, shielding him from the noise above. But the chaos of the crowd began to change everything. The shouting, the fear, it agitated him. Suddenly, Harambe grabbed Isaiah by the leg and dragged him through the water. The crowd screamed as zoo staff rushed to respond. Inside the enclosure, Harambe's behavior became unpredictable. Not an attack, but the kind of raw, instinctive power that could kill with one wrong move. Within minutes, the zoo's dangerous animal response team faced an impossible decision: wait and risk Isaiah's life, or act immediately. A tranquilizer would take too long and could make Harambe more aggressive. Then came the shot. A single gunshot echoed across the zoo. Harambe fell beside the moat. The crowd froze as keepers rushed in to pull Isaiah to safety. The boy was shaken but alive. Harambe was dead. The backlash was instant. Social media erupted with grief and outrage. The hashtag #JusticeForHarambe spread across the globe. Some said the zoo did what it had to do. Others called it senseless, that Harambe was only trying to protect the boy. Isaiah's parents faced public fury. Critics accused Michelle of negligence, and Dayon's old criminal record was dragged into the spotlight. The family released one statement thanking the zoo for saving their son, then vanished from public view. Zoo director Thane Maynard defended the team's decision. "It was the right call," he said. That child's life was in danger, but animal rights activists saw it differently. Organizations like Stop Animal Exploitation now filed complaints, arguing that if a child could reach the enclosure, the barrier was never safe to begin with. In the weeks that followed, Harambe became more than a gorilla. He became a global symbol of outrage, heartbreak, and the moral gray area between human and animal life. Vigils were held, petitions gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures, murals and memes flooded the internet. In the end, one fact remained unshakable. A child lived and an innocent animal died.
Investigators want to know how a lion got out of an enclosure before it killed an intern at a wildlife conservatory in North Carolina.
It was supposed to be a normal day at the Conservators Center in Caswell County, North Carolina, a quiet sanctuary tucked away where exotic animals lived under the care of passionate people. Among them was Alexandra Black, a 22-year-old intern full of excitement and dreams. She had only been there for 10 days, but she already stood out, smart, curious, deeply committed to animals. For Alex, this wasn't just a job, it was her calling. On that December morning in 2018, she joined a team tasked with cleaning a lion enclosure. It was routine work, but around big cats, nothing is ever truly routine. The staff followed strict safety protocols, always move the lions into a separate locked area before anyone steps into their space. And that's what they believed had been done. But somewhere, somehow, something failed. While the team worked inside the enclosure, a 14-year-old lion named Mathai, a powerful male, born and raised in the sanctuary, slipped through. No one knows exactly how. He was supposed to be secured, but in a terrifying instant he was there, inside. And then it happened. The lion lunged at Alex. It all unfolded in seconds. The attack was swift, brutal, and fatal. She had no time to escape. No one could stop it. The others screamed for help. Emergency protocols kicked in, and the Caswell County Sheriff's Office was called immediately. They tried everything, attempted to tranquilize the lion, but Mathai wouldn't go down. In the end, they had to shoot and kill him just to recover Alexandra's body. A bright, passionate young woman, gone. A majestic, complex animal, also gone. Both lost in a moment of terror no one saw coming. The Conservators Center closed its doors and the entire team was left in shock. Executive Director Mindy Stinner choked back tears as she called it, "The worst day of my life." She said, "We've lost a person. We've lost an animal. We've lost a little faith in ourselves." Alexandra's family released a statement that broke hearts across the country. They said she was a beautiful, intelligent, passionate young woman. They said she had just started her career. There was a terrible accident, but she died following her passion. This wasn't her first internship. Alex had already dedicated much of her young life to learning about animals. She wanted to build a future in the zoological world, one where people and animals coexisted with respect and care. She believed in that world, and in her short time, she had already made an impact. The Conservators Center, home to over 80 animals across 21 species, had always been a refuge. Many of its lions had been rescued from terrible conditions years earlier. Mathai, the lion who attacked, was described as nervous but gentle with those he trusted. He was a favorite among staff, often seen roaring on video clips shared by the center. But in a place where safety is everything, one unknown failure turned trust into tragedy. To this day, the exact cause of the breach remains unclear. Investigations were launched. Protocols were reviewed, but nothing could undo the loss. A family was left shattered. A team of caretakers questioned everything, and the world was reminded, in the most devastating way, that working with wild animals is never without risk, even for those who love them the most. It was September 19, 2006, in Beijing, China. The Beijing Zoo was bustling with families, tourists, and schoolchildren, all eager to see the city's most beloved resident, a 6-year-old giant panda named Gugu. To most, he was adorable, playful, and harmless. But to one man, that day, Gugu would become something far more dangerous. That man was 35-year-old Zhang Xinyan, a migrant worker from Henan province. He had traveled over 7 hours by train to reach Beijing, determined to see a real panda for the first time in his life. But by the time he arrived at the zoo, he wasn't quite himself. When he reached the panda enclosure, he was mesmerized. The railings looked low, the pandas looked peaceful, and the crowds looked too far away. Zhang wanted something no one else had, a close encounter, maybe a photo, maybe even a hug. So, as horrified onlookers watched, he did the unthinkable. He climbed over the fence. Inside the enclosure, Gugu was fast asleep, completely unaware that danger, in the form of a drunken man, was climbing down into his space. Zhang staggered toward the giant panda, smiling, mumbling softly, and reached out to touch him. And then Gugu woke up. Startled and confused, the panda's instincts kicked in instantly. In one swift motion, he lunged forward and sank his teeth into Zhang's right leg. The air filled with screams. Visitors began shouting for help. But Zhang, too drunk to realize the severity of what was happening, didn't retreat. Instead, he tried to kick the panda. That only made things worse. Gugu roared and bit down harder, this time on Zhang's other leg. The man howled in pain as the panda clamped tighter. Desperate and terrified, Zhang did something that stunned everyone. He leaned down and bit the panda back. Yes, a grown man, locked in a fight with a giant panda, actually tried to bite it. Witnesses couldn't believe what they were seeing. A surreal, chaotic struggle between man and beast. The two wrestled on the ground for several minutes, blood and fur everywhere. Zhang screaming as Gugu refused to let go. Zoo staff rushed to the scene, grabbing hoses and spraying jets of water directly at the panda in a frantic attempt to distract him. Finally, Gugu released his grip long enough for security guards to pull Zhang to safety. His legs were shredded, punctured with deep wounds that required dozens of stitches. At Renmin Hospital, reporters crowded around his bed. Pale and bandaged, Zhang tried to explain himself. "I just wanted to touch him," he said weakly. "He looked so cute on TV. I didn't think he would attack me." He admitted that the beer had clouded his judgment, that he'd been wrong, but the damage was done. Meanwhile, Gugu was completely fine. A zoo spokeswoman confirmed he hadn't been harmed, just a little shaken and, for a short while, not in the mood to eat. No action was taken against the panda. After all, he had simply done what any wild animal would do when provoked. The blame rested squarely on Zhang. Just 3 years earlier, in 2003, a college student had jumped into the same enclosure to take a selfie with a panda. He had been lucky. Injured, yes, but alive. The warnings were there. And yet, the lesson hadn't sunk in. Years later, Gugu would attack 2 more people, both of whom had entered his enclosure. It was never his fault. Each time, it was the same story. Human arrogance meeting animal instinct. It was supposed to be a quiet evening at the Olusegun Obasanjo Presidential Library, Wildlife Park in Abeokuta, Nigeria. The sun had already dipped below the horizon. The gates were closed. The crowds had left. But inside the park, a decision was made, one that would prove fatal. Babaji Daul, 35 years old and a trained lion handler, had spent years around the king of beasts. To those who knew him, he wasn't just a zookeeper. He was calm, confident, familiar with the rhythms and instincts of the wild creatures he cared for. That evening, a few late guests arrived. They wanted to see the lions. The park had officially closed, but Babaji, perhaps wanting to impress or simply to share the magic he knew so well, agreed to take them in. He led them to the enclosure. The lion was waiting. What happened next was swift, tragic, irreversible. In a moment of confidence, or perhaps routine gone numb with repetition, Babaji made a mistake. He left the protective safety gate open. He stepped inside, food in hand, heart unguarded, and the lion, the same one he'd likely fed countless times before, turned on him with terrifying force. There was no time to react, no time to scream. The lion lunged, clamped its massive jaws around his neck, and in an instant, Babaji was on the ground. Blood spilled into the dirt. Guests watched, helpless and frozen in horror. When rescue personnel arrived, the lion was still on top of him, refusing to let go. To free Babaji's body and prevent any further destruction, they made a grim choice. They shot the animal dead. The gunshot rang out across the park, a final punctuation to a scene already too surreal to believe. Babaji died on the spot. Police later confirmed what many feared. He had failed to lock the enclosure, failed to secure the barriers. Negligence, the statement read coldly, as if that word could possibly capture the horror of what took place. Authorities are still unsure whether Babaji had permission to bring in those guests after hours. It may never be clear, but what is certain is this: A man who devoted his life to caring for one of nature's most dangerous predators became its victim. His life ended in the same place where he had poured his passion, his purpose, and his pride. The management of the park issued condolences, promising to review safety protocols and protect staff and visitors alike. But for many in Nigeria and beyond, the tragedy raised deeper, darker questions about oversight, about training, and about the ever-precarious line between human and wild animal. This wasn't the first such incident. Less than a year earlier, another zookeeper was killed by a lion at a different facility in southwestern Nigeria. The pattern is haunting, and it has sparked national concern. Are the people who care for these creatures being protected themselves? For now, the cage is silent, the lion is gone, and so is Babaji Dao, a man who believed he understood the wild, until the wild reminded him that it cannot be tamed.
Just before 2 p.m., the head tiger keeper for Florida's Palm Beach Zoo was getting ready for an event at the zoo. 38-year-old Stacy Conweiser was going to answer questions from guests about the 4 rare and endangered Malayan tigers housed there.
It was a warm, Florida afternoon in April 2016 when the calm of the Palm Beach Zoo shattered into chaos. Stacy Conweiser, a seasoned zookeeper known lovingly as the Tiger Whisperer, was preparing for another Tiger Talk presentation. For Stacy, this wasn't just a job, it was her calling. She had spent years working with these rare, magnificent Malayan tigers, earning their trust with patience, skill, and a quiet fearlessness few possessed. That day, she entered the night house, the tiger's private sleeping quarters, alone, just as she had countless times before. It was an area off limits to the public, a place of routine and familiarity for Stacy. She was experienced, meticulous, respected, the zoo's lead tiger keeper. No one imagined what would unfold behind those doors. At 1:45 p.m., a staff member's voice broke over the radio. Staff emergency, tiger enclosure. Stacy had been attacked. It happened fast, in a moment that blurred the line between human and wild, between safety and instinct. A 13-year-old male Malayan tiger, 200 pounds of raw power, turned on the woman who had cared for him for years. The attack was sudden and savage, hidden from guests, but no less terrifying. Rescue personnel could not rush in. They had to wait for the tranquilizers to take effect, wait for the danger to subside. Every second dragged like an eternity. By the time they reached her, it was too late. Stacy had been airlifted to St. Mary's Medical Center in critical condition, but the injuries were far too severe. She died an hour later. The zoo's heartbeat stopped with her. Behind the public face of the zoo, shock and grief rippled through the staff. This was not just a colleague. This was Stacy, passionate, brave, dedicated. She had worked with these endangered tigers for more than 3 years, committed to their care, their conservation, and their survival. She knew the risks. She accepted them. She walked among danger every day, not for fame or glory, but for the love of a species with fewer than 250 left in the wild. Her husband Jeremy, also a zookeeper at Palm Beach Zoo, remained silent in the aftermath, his grief too deep for words. A private tribute he wrote for Stacy was read aloud to staff the following morning. Some cried. Others stared in stunned silence. The zoo, normally filled with joy and laughter, was now steeped in mourning. Outside, the world demanded answers. Investigators from OSHA, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, and local police descended on the scene. How did this happen? Had safety protocols failed? The zoo insisted Stacy followed every rule. She was the best at what she did. But the questions didn't stop. Was the help delayed? Should the tiger have been euthanized? Was this tragedy preventable? No guests had been in danger, the zoo repeated. No animals escaped. But behind those reassurances was a growing pressure, a cry from the public, from animal rights groups, from those who wondered why zookeepers were allowed to be in such close proximity to deadly animals in the first place. The Animal Legal Defense Fund released a blistering statement, condemning the incident as a failure of safety. As long as humans are placed this close to tigers, they warned, this will keep happening. The statistics back them up. Dozens of deaths, hundreds of injuries, and over 100 big cats killed since 1990. Still, the zoo held firm. The tiger would not be put down. He remained alive, tranquilized, recovering quietly behind the scenes, a symbol of the fine line zookeepers walk every day between awe and danger. Stacy Conweiser's death marked the first fatal incident in the zoo's 6-decade history. It left behind a grieving husband, stunned co-workers, and a shaken community. But above all, it left a legacy. The zoo announced plans for a memorial fund in her honor, dedicated to the very creatures she gave her life to protect. It was May 20th, 2022 at Jamaica Zoo, near Lacovia in St. Elizabeth. A tour group of about 15 visitors made their way through the exhibits. Zebras grazed lazily in the distance. Parrots chattered overhead. Everything felt safe, routine, almost peaceful. No one could have imagined that within minutes, that peace would shatter into chaos. As the group reached one of the zoo's main attractions, the lion enclosure, all eyes turned to the massive African lion inside. He was magnificent, golden mane, rippling muscles, and a slow, deliberate prowl that radiated power. Visitors whispered in awe, cameras flashing. Then, a man stepped forward. A contractor working for the zoo. Not an official zookeeper, but someone who seemed to know his way around the animals. In an attempt to impress the crowd, he did something unthinkable. He reached his hand through the chain-link fence, just inches away from the lion's face. At first, the lion only growled, a low rumble that made the ground seem to vibrate. But when nothing happened, the man smiled, soaking up the gasps of the audience. Emboldened, he went further, reaching out again, this time touching the lion's mane. That was his mistake. In an instant, the lion lunged. Its jaws clamped down on the man's middle finger with terrifying speed and force. The crowd froze, then screamed. For a split second, some thought it was part of the show, but that illusion broke as the man began to shout in pain, thrashing violently as he tried to pull his hand free. The lion's grip was unrelenting. Its jaws, capable of crushing bone with over 1,000 pounds of pressure, refused to release him. The man tugged, twisted, screamed, but the lion only tightened its hold, eyes burning with raw instinct. Visitors gasped and backed away, some running, others pulling out their phones to record what would become a viral nightmare. After several horrifying seconds that felt like an eternity, the lion finally released him. The man stumbled backward, clutching his hand, his face pale with shock. His middle finger was mangled, part of it gone completely. One witness described the scene as traumatic, saying she couldn't tell where the blood stopped and the fear began. And then, in a moment that stunned everyone, the man straightened up, turned away, and walked calmly toward a waiting vehicle, as if his mind hadn't yet caught up with what had just happened. He left the zoo immediately, but the damage was done, both to his body and to Jamaica Zoo's reputation. Within hours, videos of the attack exploded across social media. The footage was almost too graphic to believe. The man's arm caught in the fence, the lion's head shaking violently, the screams of the onlookers echoing behind the camera. Some viewers thought it had to be staged. Others were horrified that such a reckless act had been allowed to happen in front of families, with children watching. 2 days later, Jamaica Zoo issued a public statement. They called the event tragic and unfortunate, confirming that the contractor's behavior had violated all safety rules. This was not in line with our protocols, the statement read. They promised to review procedures and expressed sympathy for the injured worker. But by then, the outrage had already spread. Social media was relentless. Many blamed the contractor for his carelessness, calling him foolish for taunting a wild animal. But others turned their anger toward the zoo, questioning its training, oversight, and safety standards. How could a man feel confident enough to reach into a lion's cage and do it in front of paying guests? Some worried about the lion's fate. Would it be punished, even though it had only acted on instinct? Animal lovers begged the zoo not to harm it. "It's a lion," one commenter wrote. "It's not supposed to act tame." The story ignited a much bigger debate about zoos, captivity, and the illusion of control humans believe they have over nature. Other Jamaican facilities like Hope Zoo in Kingston quickly distanced themselves from the scandal. They issued statements reaffirming their strict animal welfare policies, emphasizing that they would never allow such a dangerous stunt to happen.